Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that get you to that next level of success in your life and business. And my guest today is Holger Seim, the co-founder of Blinkist and COO at Learners at Go One. And many of our listeners will probably be familiar with Blinkist, but for those who are not, Blinkist is a book summarizing app that offers key insights from mainly nonfiction books. It's used by over 26 million people worldwide, and Blinkist finds the most relevant, impactful books and podcasts and distills them down to their key ideas, which can be read or listened to in those 15-minute explainers called Blinks. I've personally used Blinkist for a while now, and I'm looking forward to learning more about the journey that turned Blinkist into the huge success that it is today. So welcome, Holger, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thanks for having me, Claudia. Happy to be here.
Looking forward to this. Holger, I had a quick look before we got on the call and saw that I have read 57 Blinks this year. So do you have a rough estimate of how many Blinks you have read or listened to? And do you have a favorite Blink?
That's a good question. I need to check how much I've read in total. I have not checked how many I've read this year, but in total I'm at 1,090 90 Blinks. Favorite Blink. There's two, like one of my favorite Blinks because it's like really helped me to basically transform my life or change some things in my life is Mindset by Carol Dweck. I also read the book afterwards, so would recommend definitely start with a Blink, but then continue with the book. But the Blink made me discover the book and made me understand that, the book is about you can have a fixed or growth mindset. And if you have a fixed mindset, you believe that everything is due to talent. So either you're talented in something or you're not talented in something. And a growth mindset rather tells you you can learn everything. Everything is hard work, but you can learn everything. And when I read this Blink and then later on the book, I realized that I approach some parts of life with a fixed mindset. And just that awareness helped me to turn a fixed mindset into a growth mindset more often. And that was really, really helpful. So that's probably my favorite Blink as in changed the most. Another Blink that I love a lot, just because it's really well produced and a nice story. It's not that it's a good Blink to talk about on parties, is Drunk. And that book is basically tells the story of why we get drunk as humans. So really good trivia to know, good party, small talk, and it's a really well-produced Blink.
That's awesome. I need to check that out. Haven't read the book yet. Can you walk us through the Blinkist success story from inception to exit? Just very briefly an overview.
Very briefly an overview over the last 11 years. Yes. We started Blinkist in 2012. We were 4 co-founders. We met each other in university. We, met us through our entrepreneurial spirit and passion, and did a lot of brainstormings throughout university and even later when we were in jobs to find an idea that could become the core of a business to start together. And when we started in jobs in 2010, 2011. We realized that it got harder and harder to learn, to fit lifelong learning into your daily routines. In university, you learn because it's your job. And then when you're in a real job, you have less time. And at the same time, smartphones were booming or were rising. And we realized everyone has this problem. They want to read more books, get smarter, fit more learning into their daily routines. and everyone complains that they have too little time. And at the same time, more and more people spend more time on these phones. So we thought, let's bring content that helps you, learn something onto smartphones. So we started broadly. Eventually, we realized that just offering something to learn in your waiting times, it's too abstract, not specific enough. So we narrowed down to providing the key insights from nonfiction books. And with that idea, we decided to quit our job, start a business in 2012. The first 2.5 years were really tough. We basically had to learn everything from scratch. It was our first real business. We needed to learn how to, hire people, how to develop an app, how to market an app, how to do digital marketing, how to create content at scale and at high quality. So it took us 2 years to figure all these things out. And we were twice very close to bankruptcy. And we're lucky that we found another investor who believed in us despite not having good numbers to show for in the early years. And then eventually, that was probably end of 2014, we had it all figured out. We found a good scalable process to create our content. We learned our lessons, how to do digital advertising. We found a good business model with a subscription. We went from offering only text to also audio versions. We launched the app globally with English content instead of just locally with German content. And all these things created a perfect storm. And then since end of 2014, we had a really, really successful time. We scaled year over year with 3-digit percentage growth year over year. Things got a little harder when COVID hit because Blinkist had evolved into a thing that you use on your commute. So we were a really strong commute use case. And then all of a sudden, no one commuted to work anymore. So we saw a dip in engagement. It was harder to keep up with the high growth rates that we've seen before. So we had 2 not so easy years. The good thing was that we already had shifted the business to be break even, to not burn money before. So we didn't need to lay off people. We didn't hit a wall, but we simply did not grow as fast anymore as we were used to grow. So had to change some things. Then the last bit of our journey is that we've joined Go1 this year. So an Australian-based company that aggregates training and professional personal development content for businesses so they can offer L&D solutions to their employees. We've been a partner of theirs already beforehand. They've seen that a lot of their customers love Blinkist content. And I know the founders in 3 years or 4 years now. We realized we had a similar mission. They were strong on B2B. We were really strong on B2C, selling to end customers. And then we decided to join forces and walk the next path of our journey together to make lifelong learning easier, to ultimately reach 1 billion learners and help them become smarter and better every day.
That's a great mission for sure. And I'm looking forward to dive deeper into lots of the aspects that you mentioned in this brief overview. Maybe we can start with a broad look back. So thanks to the hindsight bias, success often looks inevitable when we look back. But when we were actually going through the experience, we had to make decisions despite only having incomplete information and facing unpredictable outcomes. So looking back, how much of the success would you attribute to sheer luck, just being in the right place at the right time? Or in other words, how confident would you feel about being able to repeat that success?
I think it's, despite obviously it's a lot of hard work, it's mostly, there's so much luck. I don't know, is it 70%, is it 80%, is it 90%? It's hard to say, but I think it's always luck. But you need to work hard to be ready for when luck comes, right? You can, so it's not, even though I believe it's a lot of luck, the message shouldn't be, well, do what you want, you can't influence it, you should, luck comes to the ones who work hard for it. And I think I couldn't repeat Blinkist again right now. I think one of the aspects that we were lucky, I think we were a little too early. So the first 2 years, it was really hard to make people pay for content because no one paid for content. Only Spotify and Netflix eventually educated people to pay for digital content. The ecosystem around digital subscriptions wasn't really ready. So we've been unlucky in the first 2 years where I guess, were a little too early into the market. But then 2014, 2015, digital subscriptions started to boom. And that's most important. I believe there was between 2014 and maybe 2018 or 19, there was an area where digital consumer companies could advertise very, very effectively through Facebook. So a lot of the brands that got big because they mastered Facebook advertising. And that's much harder today. Right now, it's much harder to advertise effectively on Facebook. Privacy regulations. So Apple is not sharing data with Facebook anymore, so they can't personalize as well. More brands advertise on Facebook in the first place, so competition is higher. The CPM, so the cost for advertising, is higher. Even though the ecosystem of technical solutions, etc., is so much more evolved, there is no free lunch on Facebook anymore, and it's much more expensive to advertise these days. And not just on Facebook, also on platforms like Outbrain, Taboola with paid content, Google, etc., etc. So we benefited. We were lucky to be around us to start the business in the right time when there was such an opportunity to build a consumer brand relatively cheaply. It was still quite expensive, but building Blinkist as a consumer brand that is used by so many people today would be much harder. So when I speak to entrepreneurs who start a consumer business these days, I always say you gotta be bet on new platforms like TikTok or that have a more nascent advertising business and try to grow outside of the big paid acquisition players.
Yeah, so you were lucky insofar as you were able to capitalize on those opportunities in the advertising landscape.
Yes, we were also lucky. Look, there was a time when we were running out of money and no one wanted to invest in us. And we were lucky that literally 2 weeks before we would have to file for bankruptcy, we found someone who said, I believe in those guys. I'll give them another chance. So pure luck that we found that. You could also say we convinced those two funds that ended up investing. But it was also luck that we met them that we've been introduced to them in the first place. We were lucky to finding the right people at the right time. So there's a lot of luck related to it.
Speaking of luck or skills and the difference maybe between those two, did you figure everything out on your own, or did you have some great mentors or mastermind groups along the way to help you?
Both. In the early days, we had to figure out a lot of things on our own. But then eventually, as we got connected more and more into the Berlin startup scene, we also found mentors, advisors, people that were really helpful. For example, through one of our investors, I get introduced to Markus Witte, who was the founder and CEO of Bubble, a similar business. They also sell learning via mobile apps in a digital subscription. They were always like 2 or 3 years ahead of us in terms of development. So I learned a lot from him about building a company, building an organization, scaling that, about digital advertising, et cetera. So that was super helpful. I joined an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, where you meet with other entrepreneurs once a month and basically get very vulnerable about what's good and bad in business and life and personal, and just have a really confidential group of people that help you on your journey with their experiences, and you can help them with your experiences. So that was really important, still is very important, and not so much for business hacks or tips and tricks, but more for the personal side, how to stay strong when headwinds are coming, how to stay resilient, learning that everyone is fighting their battles. That no one, even though they may look successful and happy and great on a podcast show like this, everyone has their tough battles. It's definitely you need a lot of resilience and thick skin in this being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and a supportive community and good relationships definitely help. What have you learned about building a successful app or learning platform that you wish you had known when you started Blinkist? Is there anything in particular that you think like, oh, I wish I had known this right from the start?
I think we were really in love with product in the beginning. We wanted to build the perfect product and get everything right. And one thing I learned that your product needs to be good enough. But once your product is good enough, focus on marketing and distribution. Because otherwise, I've seen so many beautiful products die because no one discovered them and no one bought them, and the teams were too much in love with their product and invested everything there. And we also fell into that trap in the beginning, but then eventually learned we need to also focus on marketing, distribution, and that also product. So engineers, product managers need to focus on that. And that's true, I think, for all industries, not just for the L&D industry, but for the a learning product. We've chosen a pretty challenging market. Reality is most people don't love to learn. Learning is something that you have to lean in. It's hard. It's easier to watch a series on Netflix or listen to a song on Spotify. Getting people to eat their vegetables is more challenging. So there in particular, you can always chase that goal of we want to engage people more often. They should have a daily habit instead of a monthly habit. And it's all good. But you can also fight that fight forever without winning it because it's so you need to balance where you put your focus. So that's something I would have loved to learn earlier. Another thing is back in 2012 when we were really young and unexperienced, we thought, let's launch in Germany first, because Germany is a smaller market, which we know better, so we can learn in Germany, and then eventually, once we have something that's great, launch it to the rest of the world. One reason why we did that was like we don't want to embarrass ourselves globally and burn our brand basically before we have something that we're proud of. That was totally stupid because the big effort is to build the app, build the machine around it, but then whether we produce content in German or English or both, that was not the big cost driver. So we could have easily, or we should have produced content in English from the start, because we would have had a much bigger test market. And so we limited our chances to find the right customers, the right early adopters, to learn with them, et cetera, in the first 2 years. And that was, in hindsight, pretty stupid. So would have loved that someone had made me see this.
Right. So get your product good enough that you have a minimal viable product and get it out there, get it in front of a big audience.
Yeah, start with English, because English gives you a global market, and you will learn everything you need with English. There is no need to focus on a smaller language to start with. It's not generalizable. It may not be true for everything, but for our business, where producing the content, once you have one language, you can relatively easily produce a second language, because it's text and then eventually audio. For us, it was a mistake to focus on one language first.
Again, we are always we know much more in hindsight, right?
Of course, that's part of the journey. That's why we're doing it.
Exactly. So let's divide the business journey into those 3 phases. We have the build phase, we have the grow phase, and the scale phase. So what main challenges did you encounter in each of these phases, and how did you overcome them?
So the build phase is, for us, it was really to make sure we build the right thing and don't, as I said before, don't fall in love with product and build all these nice features that are not core, that are not mission critical. To just get an MVP, as you said, out there as soon as possible, and then know when it's good enough, and you should rather focus on learning how to start growing it, because otherwise you'll end up in build phase and never make it to the growth phase. So it was really the main challenge was that to really understand what's the core of our value proposition, what product do we need to deliver, so customers, so we will find early adopters that are happy with it, and get there fast, without burning too much money. We raised money early on, and then we raised money so we could spend money, and then I think we spent too much money in the early days, and that's why we almost went bankrupt. So staying nimble, focused, and not being shy to launch something soon was really important in the build phase. In the grow phase, you grow your company, and as you grow the company, you'll have to think about what culture do I want to have. In the build phase, we were a couple of people, and we knew each other, or we hired some, but then it was a small group, and you could still relatively easily reach alignment, or overcome conflicts, and then just move. But once we grew to 15, 20, 30 people, all these things became harder. And it was really important to make explicit what are the values that are important to us. How do we ensure that we reach alignment across 30 people? Do we need, what kind of hierarchy do we need? How do we want leadership to work, et cetera, et cetera? Being explicit about that, and then finding the right people that match this set of values and this culture was really challenging. Our mistake was we weren't explicit about it. We just started to hire people, and to be honest, in the early days, we were happy for everyone who applied. We were not a known brand, and then kind of hired different people, and then figured it out on the go. But the reality is, you will always build a culture, if you don't do it explicitly, you do it implicitly. And then once you have a culture and realize that's not what we wanted, it's really hard to change it, because it's really hard to change people. And then letting people go and hiring new people is also hard. So there was, other than like our challenges in the grow phase were not so much. I mean, obviously it was also very functional challenges. Now that we got this product, how do we scale it to 1 million, to 10 million, and beyond? So a lot of tactical challenges: how to do marketing right, how to go from Facebook to the next platform, and make that sustainable. But I think after the build phase, the biggest challenges were always company building related, and from grow to scale, same thing again. Going from 30 people to 150 people, it's even more challenging to not become that big and slow company that we always wanted to get out of, because the more teams you have, the harder, the more interconnected everything is, the more cross-functional everything is, the harder it is to move fast, and to reach alignment. And there was always about finding the right balance between empowering people to figure out things on their own, but also taking certain decisions top down to make sure things are aligned. Because if everyone figures things out on their own and they come to different conclusions that don't match, you ultimately don't move fast at all. And there we had a lot of internal debate with ourselves, but also within the organization. What's the right level of hierarchy, empowerment versus who takes which decision, etc. Figuring all of that out with the goal of creating an engaging, great workplace where people can make mistakes, can have impact, can have a certain level of autonomy. That's been very challenging, and it's an ongoing challenge. I think we are. I'm quite happy where we're at, but there's always things we can do better. I would love us to take faster decisions as an organization. I would love us to move faster in general. And that sometimes comes at the expense of having too much alignment and too much letting people figuring it out on their own.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, you probably have to have this top-down regulation in terms of giving it, or in terms of providing the mission and the values. I think those have to be a top-down approach, but then also a bottom-up where people can have the autonomy and can work a little bit independently so that you don't have to micromanage them. So that's what really.
Of course, I mean, no one. I think micromanagement does not make sense at all. I think people need clarity of what they're supposed to do, and clarity, and as everything is cross-functional, so whatever you do affects the work of someone else. So there needs to be, like, leadership needs to create clarity and take the decisions that are necessary to create alignment. So so whatever you decide will be aligned, or whatever, the direction that you're moving in is aligned with the direction your peers are moving in. So I think we need to take those decisions on a leadership level, and then but provide enough freedom, then strike the balance, providing enough freedom then for people to then figure it out with the clarity of, here's where we're going, these are the strategic priorities that align with each other. Then let people figure out how to fill that with life. But then it's also something I've learned. I'm a big believer in situational leadership. So just a carte blanche to say, now figure it out, is sometimes wrong. It sometimes leaves people hanging and alone. If I give you a big challenge and you may have never done it, that's too much, and then you will fail and you will feel bad about it. So situational leadership is about figuring out what a contributor or lead is to challenge a challenge that you can just figure out with great empowerment on your own, or do you need guidance because you've never done it? And that can be that in one topic you can do completely alone, in the other topic there needs to be more guidance and coaching. And then a lot of times people bash something as top down, which actually is guidance or coaching that's necessary to help them walk independently. So there, we had a lot of dogmatic, a lot of culture wars in the company. What is top down? What's the right level of empowerment, etc., etc. The moment I discovered situational leadership, I understood what was wrong before, that we've just said it's either this or that, and that's wrong. It's everything, and it depends on the situation, on your skills, on your motivations, and the size of the challenge, basically.
That's a very important point. And it's something that I've noticed as well. So I'm currently in the process of building this holistic business accelerator program for early stage health tech entrepreneurs. And something that I see as a huge challenge for all the projects is finding the first adopters and turning them into those brand evangelists who really help to spread the word and grow the user base. So for instance, when you're building, say, a better Facebook alternative, then the value of your platform is largely determined by your user base, right? So in the beginning, you have this chicken or egg dilemma where you need users on the platform to make it attractive for others to join, but you don't know how to get to that critical mass of users to create enough content and engagement in the first place. So what strategies work best for Blinkist to build this critical mass of users, and what strategies would you use right now if you were planning to launch a new app?
So Blinkist is not a social product, so we don't have these network effects, so we did not need to leverage them. So right now we obviously leverage what we learn from others to give you better recommendations. We've also a year ago launched a feature called Spaces that lets you connect with others, build spaces. So we have the social element now, but we didn't have it in the beginning. In the beginning, it was a library of titles. You could sign up, you could subscribe, and then discover titles, read them, listen to them, finish them. And it didn't matter to you whether you were the only one using it or whether a million of others used it, because we did not show, here's what a million others read. And we did not leverage this information in our recommendations early on. So for us, the challenge was to simply get users on board and make them stay, make them use the product regularly so they get value out of it and then renew their subscription. And as we grew, we started to tap into more of these social elements. And I think it's these days, especially now in the current market environment, it's really hard to raise enough funds to kickstart a product that needs network effects to work. So it's just launching a new Facebook these days would be so expensive. So I think at the core, you need to have an MVP that doesn't require network effects. That even if a user uses it alone, she gets enough value out of it. And then eventually, version 2 or 3 or 4 can then also leverage network effects as you go there. If you have a vision of, to stick to that example of replacing Facebook, I would think of an MVP that gets you there, gets you to a certain level without network effects. And then I don't know whether there was also an aspect of question, how do you get to users in the first place? I think for consumer startups, there is no way around paid acquisition. Even though I said it's harder these days than it was back then, getting to your first couple of thousand users or tens of thousand users via Facebook is still doable and relatively cheap. So Facebook becomes harder at scale, but it's still the platform to relatively quickly find whether there's users that like your product and are willing to pay for it. So I recommend every startup, explore Facebook. It will help you through the seed stage. It will help you get some people to see your product and evaluate whether you have product market fit or can get there. But then don't plan to scale to tens of millions just with Facebook, because it becomes likely too expensive unless you have a killer product that is such a painkiller that once you acquire the user, he or she will never go away. For B2B, I believe founders have to be the best salespeople. You just have to, I see a lot of B2B startups these days where the founders come from the industry. So they have a good network in the industry they sell to. They have a unique insight about a pain point in that industry and know how to solve it. And then I see them being the best salespeople. They are writing emails, making calls, they're on conferences and just selling. And I think, and then I see sometimes founders that don't have a customer yet and say they want to hire a head of sales. And that's a red flag for me, because if you can't sell your product to your first 10 B2B customers on your own, something is wrong. Then there's too much of a skill gap in the founding team. Usually, it's never that black and white, but that's what I make of it.
Right. Now, once you've got those first users, you've got to keep them engaged. What gamification elements have you found to be most effective for user engagement and retention?
It, again, depends very on the market. I can relate to Blinkist. So with Blinkist, we never focused too much on gamification because we thought gamification is a drug that doesn't solve the underlying problem. If a user opens the app, they want to find something relevant. If they find something relevant, they start it, and if the content delivers value to them, a good key insight, a good story to tell, then that gives them a dopamine kick, and then they'll come back. So we always said let's focus on this true value creation instead of putting too much replacement drugs with gamification in it. So we've been a little idealistic in that regard, but obviously we have not done this for the full 11 years. So eventually we also said, let's try some things. And we did learn that some of these elements work very well. So if you implement streaks, so challenge users to read something every day. If you, we did an experiment with badges where you could earn badges. We saw that a certain segment of our users responds very well to it. whereas another segment told us like, go away with it. I don't want this playful thing. I want to learn something here, and I don't need a badge. So I think it's it is relevant, or it helps to motivate a certain group of customers, but it turns others off. So we are still quite careful with it.
Right. Now, as we mentioned in the intro, Blinkist has a significant user base. So how do you gather feedback from your customers and ensure that their needs and desires are incorporated into the growth and development of the app?
Yeah. So different things. We have customer support, so customers reach out to us, usually when they have a problem, and we help them. But then also take the information we're getting from customer support, aggregate them, so we know what's not working, what do people like, what do people not like. We use surveys, so we frequently send either in-app surveys or email surveys to get ask some questions how they like it, to get ask them about NPS, whether they would refer us or not. So that's a very important element for us to get feedback on scale. And sometimes also when we think about a new feature, we launch a specific survey to get some thoughts around that feature. And then last but not least, so that's a quantitative part. Also, we analyze App Store reviews and all that. Then we have a qualitative user research team, a team that talks to customers, that reaches out, hey, we would love to talk to you, to see how you're using the app, to learn more about you, to learn what you would love to see in the app. And we do interviews. And I also try to talk to customers myself frequently. There's times when I can do that more and times where I do that less. But it's invaluable to have a habit of talking to customers directly, because just looking at what they say in a survey doesn't help to read between the lines. And sometimes you need to talk to a person, because a person may say, so one interesting example, people say they want more content. So we have too little content for them. But what we've learned, we have a couple of people that worked with Audible beforehand, and they said, well, also Audible receives the feedback that people want more content. And Audible happens to have every audiobook out there, or 95% of audiobooks that exist. So when people say they want more content, the answer is not they want more content. The answer is they want to find more relevant content more easily. So it's about then investing in our discovery experience, in our personalization algorithms, etc., in providing the right context for them to start a certain book. And if you just read the survey result, people want more content, you could say, well, then let's produce more blinks and hope everything will, that the numbers will go up. But it's usually not that easy. And you need to read between the lines and dig a little bit deeper about what they really need. And sometimes they can't say what they want. They can go very deep on what they need or what the problems are. And then you need to think, right, what could solve that? What solution could solve that problem? And that's why I believe it's invaluable to speak to customers directly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Can you maybe share some data on how customers interact with the Blinkist app? Are they listening more, or are they reading more? How many blinks do they consume on average? And how often do they use the app? Just to give people...
So on a high level, people tend to listen more than they read. But it's easier to listen, or you can fit listening into more times of the day. When you commute, when you're running, when you're working out, you can listen. You can't read. So there's more time to listen than to read.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we see much more minutes being listened versus minutes being read. In terms of how often do people use Blinkist, it really depends on the segment you're in. On average, if I take global average, we see that people read or listen between 4 and 5 blinks a month. But then there's people that have a daily habit. There's people who just who use Blinkist twice a year when they're on vacation, but then read a lot of blinks within 1 week. So it really, really depends on the segment, on your use case, and it also switches. People have busy times of their life when even Blinkist is too long, when they even don't have the headspace to tap into Blinkist. And we don't see them for 2 or 3 months, and then they come back to a more regular habit. So it's really hard to generalize that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk about the marketing side for a bit. What have been the most, I mean, you already mentioned Facebook in the beginning, but what have been the most successful marketing strategies for Blinkist? And did they change during the different business stages? I mean, you already mentioned that Facebook was probably good in the beginning, but it didn't really scale. Was it the same for different platforms, or what else worked well or did not work well?
Yeah. So yeah, Facebook was definitely big, still is big, but it just Facebook alone would have not helped us to scale to where we are today. We after Facebook, the next big channel for us has been paid content platforms like Outbrain and Taboola. It's these little articles that you see on online news sites. That's a very native form of advertising. It targets digital readers, which happen to be our target audience. So that worked very well for us, but it was not easy to crack. Finding the right articles, the right funnel to get them from reading an article to installing the Blinkist app took us quite a while to figure out. But when we had figured it out, it helped us to scale really fast. And there were times where this channel has been much bigger than Facebook. We tapped early into podcast advertising when podcasts started to boom. I think, again, there also was a time when that was cheap. Now it's very expensive. So if you look at what you had to pay for 1,000 listeners 3-4 years ago versus right now, that easily doubled. So we're not as aggressive in podcast advertising anymore as we've been. Google is becoming more and more relevant for us. Google search, early days, when people search for book titles, they want to have the full book. But as we build our brand and as more people know about Blinkist, we have a better chance of also then offering Blinkist as a solution when they search for books. So that is something we're investing more in these days. And yeah, it's a classic thing. It's Google, Facebook, Apple search ads, paid content. There's no secret. I think we've just over time learned to play in all of those channels, to have the right ads, to have the right funnel, the right bidding strategies. But yeah, I think in the early days, it never makes sense to start with everything because you don't have time for everything. So usually, need to pick 1 or 2 channels and master them and then build on top of that.
Well, I discovered Blinkist through ads on one of my favorite podcasts. So from a business perspective, I wonder what podcast marketing strategy has been the most successful for you? So was it running your own podcast show? Maybe was it guesting on other shows for you as one of the founders? Or was it just, buying ads or running ads on popular shows? So there are lots of different ways to do this.
Yeah, where did you discover us? Do you remember the podcast?
I think it might have been Lex Fried. Was it Lex Friedman? Is that?
Might have been, yeah.
Might have been that one.
So yeah, so our biggest, we did classic podcast sponsorships. So we paid for advertising in podcasts. Obviously, when I'm asked to appear as a guest in a podcast, I say yes, not because I love to build my personal brand, but because I believe it's always nice to a good chance to tell others about Blinkist and also share some learnings that may help others. But that is not a big portion. We never analyzed that, but that does not on podcasts every week. So that doesn't scale. But paying hosts for inserting ads about Blinkist, that has been our playbook. And initially we started, we thought, try to find podcasts where the content of the podcast or the focus of the podcast is aligned to the titles we have on Blinkist. But then eventually learned it's all about the host. And, an audience, it's about how well is the host connected with her audience. Does the audience follow the host? And then if the host recommends something, is the audience almost religious if he or she recommends it, I have to try it or not. So one of our learnings has been it's much more about the host than about the category of the podcast.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I was about to ask you how you decide which podcast you sponsor, asking for a friend.
Mm.
But I guess you already answered that. So it's
Yeah.
really about.
And that's also, I mean, as I said before, we were now not as bullish on podcast advertising anymore these days because it became really expensive. So every advertising we do, we always want a return on investment. We want to obviously get the money back eventually. So get enough customers in to pay for the advertising. Otherwise, we couldn't survive. And that's become harder just because the CPMs, the cost per 1,000 listeners you have to pay, have increased quite significantly.
Right. Let's switch gears for a moment and talk about mindset because so many entrepreneurs struggle with things like fear of failure and just taking risks in general. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being totally risk averse and 10 being totally risk seeking, where do you see yourself on that scale?
I think the answer again is situational. I think when I started my career, I was totally risk seeking, or at least not totally, but because it took me a couple of weeks to then foster the courage to quit my job and start Blinkist. But then I felt like I had nothing to lose. I'm young. I have no family. I want to become an entrepreneur, so I'm doing this now. And then I was really this early phase really felt like we went all in and full risk and we were always surfing at the edge of bankruptcy. So but as things grew, the more success we had and the more people we employed, I already realized that I became more risk averse again because I wanted to protect what we had built. I wanted to protect, I didn't want to fuck it up anymore after we had reached a certain size. I didn't want to be the one to tell employees, you all have no job anymore because we hit a wall. So there had been times, especially now during Corona, everything felt really, really tough. Lots of, we had to take some hard decisions or move fast, be agile, and there I felt like I wasn't as easy with just taking the risk and leaning in anymore as I felt in the early days. Probably also related, by then I had my first kid, second was on the rise. So just my whole life situation had changed. So I couldn't take certain risks anymore because if I take a decision and it goes wrong in the early days, I could brute force my way out of it again by simply working more, working harder. Now with 2 kids, I also need to work hard at home, and energy levels are not as high as they were in my 20s. So that also affects it. So you could say that my risk tolerance has decreased a little bit over time. But I'm still a very optimistic person. So even on that level from 1 to 10, I'm probably still on a 7 or 8 when it comes to willingness to take risks. I'm optimistic. I'm not very anxious. I think I have most of the time a healthy relationship to work. It's just work. There are more important things, and that helps me to sometimes take bold decisions. And also having taken some good decisions over the past 11 years gives me the confidence to be able to be wrong every now and then, because I know it's not the end of the world. There will be better decisions again.
That's a great mindset to have. So how do you tend to make decision these days? Is it mostly gut instinct? Is it a list of pros and cons? Or do you have a certain decision-making framework that you like to use?
I don't have a framework. Like I can't point to a site or to a fancy name. But what I try to do is I'm a data-driven person, so I love to look at data. That is quantitative data, but also qualitative data from customer interviews. But then I believe that data never tells you specifically, here's what you need to do. You can always use data to probably you can use data to make 10 different go to 10 different directions and just skew the data in the right direction to make your case. So I think based on a good set of quantitative and qualitative data, I believe in gut, because I believe our gut is the best data processing algorithm we have. And I think taking gut decisions that are informed by the right data are actually data-driven decisions. So yeah, a lot of times I collect all this data, I talk to people, and then I come up with hypotheses that I feel strong about. Then I test those hypotheses by sharing it with some people, letting them, give me, dig holes in it or support it. And then sometimes I see something new and adjust it, but then I'm usually ready to take a decision quite quickly. I need that process. I usually want that for especially for big decisions. I want to be challenged by others, so I usually follow that, whatever you want to call it, advice process. But then then I'm usually have a bias for action and say, like, instead of going into analysis paralysis or discussing it for 6 more weeks, let's take the decision. Let's make sure we learn fast or fail fast, and then move on.
Right. So gather information and data to train your intuition, and then just move fast.
And trust your intuition. And if someone says, well, that's not backed up by data, that's just a gut feeling, I think a gut feeling is very powerful. I think that's it's a gut feeling, and entrepreneurs or senior people are paid to have a good gut feeling. Like I think that's something good. If you have a good gut, trust it, and don't let others tell you that gut feeling is not data driven.
No, it's definitely data driven. It's how you teach your system, right?
Yeah.
Now, Blinkist has this strong emphasis on personal development and continuous learning. I'm curious, what are some habits or practices that you have adopted over the years that have contributed to your personal growth and success?
Yeah. So I try to meet with other people often, so with peers, to just compare notes. I try to be very vulnerable, so be very open, to not say, like, everything is great and everything is a success, but I share. I'm an open book. I share what's good, I share what's bad. And usually then when you start that way, also the others share what's good and what's bad, and you get into a much deeper conversation and learn much more from it. I love to read. Surprise, surprise. So I do have a habit of reading a lot, whether that's books, articles, links. But I get a lot of inspiration from that. That's about it. Reading a lot, talking to a lot of people, being real and being vulnerable, to make sure you have deep conversations, and truly learn from others. These are the routines I have, or the hacks. There's nothing more magically to it for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's really important that you pointed out that you have to talk about the good things as much as you have to talk about the bad things. So there are a few critical voices that I just wanted to mention and hear your thoughts on. So Blinkist has this big fan base, but there are also some critics who, criticize Blinkist for doing what they do.
We would do something wrong if we didn't have critics.
Exactly. So some argue that those condensed summaries can lead to just, shallow understanding of complex topics. How do you respond to these concerns? And are you taking any steps to ensure a balance between the brevity and the depth of knowledge? Or do you just say, okay, this is our business model and that's not our concern?
So I think most of those critics misunderstand our purpose, our mission. They think that we want to create a world where everyone just reads Blinks and doesn't read books anymore, or just engages with short form content and doesn't go into long form content anymore. That's not what we want to do, and that's also not what's happening. there's time for a healthy snack in between, and there's time for a 3-course meal, and both is good. Again, situational. So the people that fear that people will only read links in the future and not read books anymore, I think they are, well, first of all, I think they don't believe in books. We believe in books. Books are great. Long form books are great, and we will not and we cannot replace them. So the people who want to go deep will always go deep, whether that's with books or 10-hour YouTube videos or whatnot. But a lot of those people don't have the time to go deep all the time. A lot of those people want to get some quick food for thought every now and then. They want to get, a little bit of knowledge here and there to then take a decision where to dive deep. And that's how they use Blinkist. And then there are people who don't read books anymore. And some of them use Blinkist to at least get some of the author's stream of thoughts. And you could argue, well, isn't that better than nothing? So if we get them onto Blinkist from YouTube or Spotify, 30 days, 30 minutes a month, isn't that better than 0 minutes a month? So we do not have people who were avid book readers beforehand, then discovered Blinkist, and then stopped reading books and only superficially educate themselves. This doesn't happen, and that's, I think, what people fear happens. And obviously there is a trend. People have shorter attention span, less people read long form books, and more people read or listen to short form. That's a thing, but I would love that. We're not that big yet that we created that trend. That trend is happening, and we try at least to put good content that helps you learn something in those short attention spans, because otherwise they're filled by social media. So I think the critics didn't understand it or don't understand why we're doing what we're doing and how people use it. And I think it's a little patronizing to think that other people then just use Blinkist and don't read books anymore and think that they've learned everything from a blink. No one thinks they've learned everything from a blink. It's also not what we sell, that you get the full book, everything that's in there in 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's all relative and depends on what you compare it to. Percentage-wise, what would you say? How often do you still buy and read the original book after reading the blinks? Do you have any data on that, or a feeling, a gut feeling?
55% of people tell us they read more thanks to Blinkist. So they read also more books. Less than 40% tell us they read the same amount of books. And then there's 5% that say they read less books.
That's super interesting.
So we were adding to the market. That's all quantitative, like surveys. We can't measure how many people click buy the book button, because no one clicks the buy the book button on Blinkist. If I want to read a book, I go to Amazon. I don't go to Blinkist, search for the button and click it there. So we can't track the real funnel, but we regularly ask our users.
That's super interesting. Maybe you should add a button at the end of the blink, like buy the book. You can have.
Like we've done that. It's there, but it's not a user. It doesn't solve a user need. Like no one has a pain point of buying books. Either you go to the bookstore of your choice, or you add books to your Amazon cart whenever you do. You don't. So it's just adding a button there doesn't make people click, because a lot of times they read a blink, then they have it top of mind, then eventually when they have time to read again on their Kindle or whatnot, or when they're in the book shop, then they say, oh yeah, I read this blink, I liked it, now I buy the book. So it doesn't happen at the same time. And the buy the book button only helps when right now you say, I want to read it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, because another criticism that I've seen is that the authors kind of get the short end of the stick, because people now just, as we mentioned, read the blinks and they don't click through to buy the books. So I don't know. Do you sometimes get authors who reach out and say, like, I don't want to be on this platform, I want...
Very seldomly, but yes, it happens. A lot of times I mean, so, like most of the times when authors reach out, they reach out and want to understand why their book is on Blinkist and whether they can, influence the summary or whether they can earn something with it. And we have a program. We do share a part of our revenues with the publishers because they hold the rights. And then most of the publishers share some of that again with authors. Some of them don't. So we had authors who complained they don't get anything from us, but we share revenue with our publishers. So it was actually a publisher problem, not a Blinkist problem. Reality is they get the short end of the stick also from publishers. So they get in advance, and then but then for a long time they don't get anything for a book sale, or even if you buy a book for 15 euros, the share that an author gets from that is pretty low. And we do what we can. We're not drowning in money here and are all millionaires. So we want to grow the business. So we reinvest our money in marketing and in building the product and creating more content, and try to squeeze things hard to share enough revenues with publishers and authors. The core value we deliver, though, is we create more awareness to authors. And a lot of authors are consultants, are coaches. They want to spread their ideas, and we can help them spread their ideas and get more awareness for their personal brand and their ideas, get more awareness to broader audiences. So usually, and that's how the majority of authors sees it, it's a win. They have their book sales from what publishers do, and that's how they earn their money. And then Blinkist is the cherry on the cake.
Right. Yeah. I see a similar thing. So for me, I'm a huge book nerd as well, and I love discovering and reading new books. So what I did, because I had so many authors reach out to me because they wanted to be on the podcast, what I've done is I've created a special segment on the show, which is called the Leaders or Readers Wired for Success Book Club, that features the best books from the science, self-development, and entrepreneurship categories. So it's all nonfiction books. And it's not like a blink in that it summarizes all the important key points in the book. So what I do is I read the book before we record the interview, and then I just pick a few selected topics from the book and maybe some adjacent topics that are of interest to the listeners. And then I discuss it with the authors. So we have a little more depth, but it's really selective. And it's just to give the book a little more flavor and context. So I still want people to go out and buy the book. They shouldn't get the feeling like, okay, I listened to the podcast and now I don't need to read the book anymore. And at the same time, I really want to help authors feel appreciated and be able to show off their book. So what I'm trying to create here is this win-win situation where everyone gets what they want. Maybe we should collaborate.
What we're trying to as well, and it works for the majority of authors.
Yeah, I bet it does. Totally agree. Another question I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the interesting trends in the SaaS world that you are seeing right now, and what do you think how will they influence business in the next couple of years? For instance, how will the quick advances of AI impact this sector? Are you worried that ChatGPT is going to steal your market?
Not so much, because it was never about producing content. I think it's always about people. There's so much content out there. YouTube, TED, Wikipedia, find so many things on Google. There's an abundance of content. But people have a hard time to make it a habit, to make it a habit to learn something consistently every day, every week. And AI, GPT, all the other large language models help us to do that even better. They help us to produce more content, which is great. But they also help us to give more context to why we recommend something to you. They help us to move more towards a coach being a digital coach for you rather than just a library. They help us to, deliver links in the voice of your choice, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we can make the service much better and can add much more value around it to help you build a habit. I don't believe that people will build a habit to go to ChatGPT every day and say, give me something that I can learn. I mean, if that pattern starts, like if that happens, there is a scenario where there's this movie called Hers with Joaquin Phoenix, and a reality of the future could be that, where everything you do via your personal assistant. In this future, we would have a problem, and so would 90% of the apps of the vertical services out there, because then there's no booking.com anymore in such a world. There's no Blinkist, there's no Audible. There's only one. The person who controls the digital assistant sells you everything, basically. And then maybe some services can plug into that API to fulfill certain orders. In that scenario, we have a problem, because probably we will not be the one building that. That will be one of the tech giants. But I do not believe in that future. I believe in a future where there are still vertical services that are powered by AI that help you do a certain thing very well, whether it's booking your next trip, or whether it's building a learning habit. So I think as long as we stay, at the edge of things and use AI to create user value, I think we have a thriving business.
It's definitely going to be interesting the next few years. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today?
No, if you have not heard about Blinkist, give it a try. Listen to Mindset or Drunk if you want to start with 2 good recommendations, and let us know what you think.
Fantastic. Holger, again, thank you so much for sharing those insights with us today. I feel like we could have talked for hours, and it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me, Claudia.
Thank you again. Take care and talk soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That's a fantastic, easy, and zero-cost way to help the show grow. Just use the link in the show notes and make my day. Want more? For quick, actionable tips and insights to guided meditations and a side of biohacking, join my inner circle and get access to exclusive subscriber-only content. Again, just use the link in the show notes to join the tribe. Thank you for your support, and see you on the other side. Take care and talk soon. Bye.